because you don't want to include us the way that we want, then we walk away from this thing. You will govern whoever that you want to govern. And do you get a feeling that the ANC in Gauteng doesn't want to govern it again? Thank you very much.
Can I just say, it's not the way we want. It's the way the agreement says. Okay. It's the way the statement of intent says. It's not the way we want. I just want to clear up that point. Sorry.
All right. So I think the first thing is to have an understanding of what we had put on the table in terms of the proportionality. And I must bring the public into confidence here and say the South African psyche is that push, get into something, and then 6 months down the line you get blamed for it. What would have happened if we now take this as is and we go into government, and anything that happens in cabinet that doesn't really reflect what we are trying to then achieve? 6 months down the line, the public starts having an outcry about lack of service delivery and all of that. We're going to be blamed to say you are part of this government. And you forget that we now got into this with very limited say in what happens in that particular cabinet. So that is where we're coming from. That's the first thing. What are we prepared to then do? We haven't closed the door. Helen is still engaging with the national leadership. Part of the national leadership was there today. They were in this meeting. The SG was in this meeting, but left halfway because, as well, we have reached broadly, the principles, and the spirit was that we would have continued with it until we reach consensus. But unfortunately, that is broken. When it got to the point where we then said, if you're looking at the statement of intent, it doesn't really talk to what is actually being put on the table, and the interpretation thereof. It's something that still remains a little bit of a concern. Now, what are we prepared to then do? We're prepared to then go and say, if we are willing to look at this and also be able to then find, the middle ground where, the numbers are changed slightly, because then we need to then ensure that, there's not an over-representation of the ANC in this particular cabinet. We agree that, they can have a majority number, but it doesn't mean that you have to have 2 for 1, as an example. You have to then find a balance there, and this is what we are proposing. If the ANC is willing to meet us on that, in that regard, we're willing to then, get around the table. But should that not happen, we will gladly take, the opposition seats. We will gladly, engage with them on an ongoing basis, on an issue-by-issue basis. It doesn't necessarily mean that we will be, jumping at the first opportunity to pass a motion of no confidence. I don't think the DA operates in that particular manner. We want to then ensure that the perspective will be gladly do that.
So just maybe to add on that. So here in Gauteng, you have clearly said, and the DA has clearly said, that they do not want to work with the EFF. If the ANC takes you to or agrees to the terms that you are speaking about, does it then mean in the municipalities that's what we are going to see? Because it would not make sense for the province, for the provincial leadership to work together while municipalities or regional areas are not working together. Would it be something that you're willing to discuss, to say maybe let's take them out and work together everywhere in Gauteng? And also, just lastly, my understanding is that they offered you 2 seats or you demanded 2 seats of education and the health. And that was the agreement when you went to vote for the premium in the legislature. Is that the position?
No, I don't think when we went, and I don't know where that is coming from, when we went to engage with them initially, there was never even about portfolio allocation. It was about how do we deal with the issue of proportionality, because you have to agree on the numbers before you engage on the position. So we were not even at the position level as yet. So that's the first thing. The second part was that we were saying that let's deal with the province first. Let's deal with the issue of a national agreement. Once you have done that and the mechanisms are working, you can then say, remember, there is an intention to have a, call it the second CODESA if you like, where civil society and everybody else will be engaged, as had been said, to then say how these things are going to work going forward. Work a whole lot better than going forward. But at this point in time, we're not where we are discussing the issues of local government. It has been how do we get the province going? how do we get a national government going? I think there's an issue of national government that has now been resolved. KZN has easily been resolved. Here in Gauteng, this is where we find ourselves.
Written from Netwerk 24. It seems like it was a very frustrating day. What are some of the reasons that the ANC is giving as to why they aren't moving or they aren't willing to give up some of the positions?
Okay. Well, I'll surmise, I don't know for sure. Yesterday, the Premier, Panyaza Lesufi, was going to call a press conference to announce his cabinet. And he was probably going to say, this is what it is, and I'm leaving these 3 seats for the DA. Then Fikile Mbalula, the Secretary General, intervened and said no. And I happened to be in Gauteng for another reason, and I stayed over, and I came here today. And Fikile Mbalula was there, and we did have this discussion. And then it emerged that the ANC was going to announce 7 ANC people and 8 ANC people. That's Panyaza plus the 7. 8 and leave 3 for us, which was what we suspected, but it was confirmed today. Now, why is the ANC sticking on 8? Apart from the fact that I don't think they fully realize that the voters want power sharing. They don't want us to be co-opted. They want us to share power. They don't want us to become hostages of the ANC. They want us to be genuinely in power, not just in office. The second thing is that the ANC is very, very divided in Gauteng. And they need to put together an executive that takes account of all the various factions and put them together. That is my surmise. And that is why they need to have enough places to satisfy enough people. We're having a similar challenge currently in Parliament, and I'm not here to talk about Parliament, but we also need a fair allocation of various house chairs and other things in terms of the statement of intent. We cannot be rolled back on everything as if we are some kind of useful crutch to keep the ANC in power. We're a party in our own right with a mandate from the voters that intends to execute that mandate in a power-sharing arrangement. And that is our commitment to the residents of Gauteng, who voted for us in very large numbers, and we will fulfill that commitment, and we won't allow the wool to be pulled over our eyes.
Heidi, and then I'm going to the shirt at the back.
It's Heidi Jockus from ENC again. I just want to ask in terms of at what point does the DA walk away? Is there a condition? I mean, I asked this question to the PA on Sunday, and they said if we don't get a post provincially or nationally, we're out. Is the DA thinking about that here in Gauteng? If you don't get what you ask for, will you eventually walk away? Because, I mean, the talks with the ANC, they are sticking to what they are offering and what's on the table. And sorry, I asked you this morning, and you said you don't want to get into it, but I'm going to ask you again. What did you ask for? You said you don't want to speak about the portfolios, but are you able to tell us which portfolios you actually asked for?
Okay. You want to
So you got this.
All right. So I think Helen will talk about the walking away part. Let me respond to what we were proposing, because in the negotiations you don't stamp your authority. You propose, there's a counter proposal, and you take it from there. What we said is that we're looking at the Department of Infrastructure Development, DID. Ideally, we would have loved to incorporate that with COCTA for a number of reasons. You're looking at municipalities that are falling apart. You're looking at infrastructure that is falling apart. Therefore, you want to then start coordinating the working of the infrastructure from a provincial perspective, but working with municipalities. That's why you would want that. And this is what we thought that would be able to then bring in some impact in that regard. We said we would look at education or health, not both, that one or that one. And we said then the other one which we would look at was economic development, or no, transport. So now looking at economic development, which would have also included agriculture as well, as alternatives to that. So we didn't come and say, you give us this position or we walk away. We said these are the proposals that we would want to then put on the table.
What did the ANC offer you? Did they tell you which positions?
We were not there yet.
So they didn't say transport?
We were just told, give us 3 names and we'll take it from
and
there.
they'll decide.
If I may say, Heidi, you've used terms like what did you want and what did they offer? And that displays the imbalance in those discussions. Because we're working in terms of this agreement. And this states very carefully and clearly what is our right. It's not that we come as supplicants with a begging bowl. We are trying to implement an agreement signed by ourselves and by the ANC. And we take it seriously. We genuinely do. Because you can't establish governments in good faith unless these agreements are taken seriously. It's like having an anti-nuptial contract and everybody just ignores it afterwards. You can't do that. I've been in many governments before. I've taken over many governments from the ANC, actually. And I now run the DA's governance unit, which manages a lot of coalitions across the country. And if these documents aren't worth the paper they are written on, then the government that emerges from it is on rocky ground and has no foundation. So we expect the agreement to be implemented, which I think is absolutely rational and fair. And not only is it rational and fair, it is a prerequisite for the government to work. So we are saying clause 16, proportionality reflects the outcome of the election and inclusivity.